Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Mike Hausman. I'm the Chief Communications Officer for Thompson School District, and we really appreciate you joining us. Before we get started here, I'm going to ask the individuals here with me on stage to briefly introduce themselves.
Good evening, everyone. I am Todd Piccone, Chief Operations Officer here.
Good evening. I'm Bill Siebers, the Chief Human Resources Officer.
I'm Tim Duran. I'm with the Loveland Police Department. I'm your new Chief of Police.
Hi, everyone. I am Mark Schaefer, Superintendent of Schools.
Good evening, everybody. Melissa Schneider, Chief Academic Officer.
My name's Theo Robeson. I'm the Executive Director of Secondary Education.
And I'm Michael James, and I'm the principal of Loveland High School.
All right. Thank you very much. Before we get started with our listening session, Mr. James has a few words of introduction for us.
So I did want to open up this evening and speak to the community and truly apologize to all of you for the chaos, the confusion, and the frustration that my actions may have caused from this incident. I've returned to school as of Monday, ready to listen, strengthen our protocols, address our safety concerns, and move forward with positivity, fully dedicated to finishing out the school year. I've opened up my schedule at school for staff and students to visit with me, and I definitely want to do that for you as well. If there's anything that is still out there following this community meeting, I welcome you to give a call to the school, talk to me personally. We can schedule some time to sit down and chat about anything further you might have. I recognize that it will take significant time for the community to rebuild trust in me as a result of this incident. It's also important that we support each other. We've been expressing this as a staff, as students, as families, moving forward with the understanding that everyone has the best intentions for our students and for each other. When we commit to each other, that's when we best serve each other, and that's what a community is all about. We learn, we grow, we move forward, and I think that's our theme looking back on 2 weeks ago and what has taken place here at Loveland High School. As we finish out the year, I hope to lead our school community to a true place of strength and unity as we finish the next 6 weeks. Thank you.
All right. So as we get into the listening session part, I want to just describe a little bit about the format. Listening sessions, the goal of a listening session is for people to have a safe and comfortable space to provide their thoughts and to provide their comments. And to honor that safety, one of the things that we'll be doing is as we call people up and you come up and you provide your comments, we won't have a back and forth dialogue at that time, but what we will be doing is we'll be recording via written word if you have any specific questions that you would like to ask. And then when we get done at the end of the meeting, we're going to have a portion where we answer those questions, okay? At this time, we have 9 people who have signed up to speak. We definitely have time tonight between now and 8 p.m. where we can have more individuals speak if they'd like to. So we'll go through these original 9, and then for those of you who have not registered, if you decide that you would like to, we'll open it up again for people to come forward and to comment. We will for sure begin our Q&A session, or I should say answering the questions. We will do that for sure starting at 7:40, so we have plenty of time in order to take care of that before we finish at 8 o'clock. Okay? What I would ask to start, if you could please limit your time to 2 minutes, just out of respect for everybody else. So we will start with Christy Rodriguez, and we have 2 microphones that are set up, one here and one there. You can use whichever one you would like to use. And go ahead and come on down, Christy. And after Christy, it'll be Diane, I believe it's Bauerfeld. Forgive me if I mispronounced that. Hi, Christy.
Hi. I don't know, can you all hear me? My name's Christy Rodriguez. My son's a junior at the school. I have just a couple questions. My main one was, why was this threat and the reaction to this one so much different than the others that we've heard about? I know there's been not millions, but a bunch of other threats we haven't even heard about. and I don't know why this one was so different. The reaction from the teachers, the parents, the students, the staff, that's my main question. Why was this one? Why did this constitute this? None of our other threats have, so I'd appreciate y'all letting me know. Thank you.
All right, next we have Diane Bauerfeld, and after that, Chad Hendricks will be following. That's fine. Yep, you bet. No problem. So Chad Hendricks. There's Chad.
Thank you for having us tonight and having this meeting. I just want to express what I went through that day, having a freshman dropping off a freshman and having a junior driving her own vehicle, sitting outside the school perimeter because she was scared to come to the parking lot. The biggest thing I learned in conversations with her as it was happening was there is a serious distrust that she has, her friends have, with the safety and security protocols within the school district and at the high school. And I think it's important that, and it sounds like some of the steps are being taken, but I just want to make sure that the students are heard and listened to and given that opportunity to speak. The other thing I learned that a lot of this trust was precipitated from an event on the first day of school. Apparently there was a firearm at the school and there was a lockdown, and that's all I heard in the conversations with her, trying to calm her down to make the best decision for both of them, was they locked us in school with a firearm. And I have no information on that event, so I don't have any perspective to give on that, but I think it's important to look back at that and address that with the students, because that from my perspective, from my daughter and her friends, that's where that distrust came from. The other thing, I guess the question I would have, I was definitely caught off guard as a parent, and that's my responsibility, on where to go to validate and verify, what to do, should kids go to school, how to, is this just, it was obvious being in the parking lot what was happening, and it was gossip, it was rumors, and it was all blowing up on social media, and I could watch, and if it wasn't so serious, I would have been laughing. But I was lost as to where to go, where to find information to validate and verify that. So, thank you.
Thank you, Chad. Right, up next we have Dawn Bash, and after that it will be Jen Schneider.
Hi, I'm Dawn. I have a graduated senior and a current freshman. And I think, it sounds like we're all having kind of the same questions about why was this threat different than any others? Why was it handled differently? Why was the reaction from multiple people different than what we would otherwise normally expect? I'm hoping to get a little bit more clarification about that as well. And I can share a little bit about how our reaction as a family was from it. I actually did drop off my kiddo, she does not drive yet, at the school, and then as I was leaving, heard that there was something going on. My youngest actually called my oldest first and said, hey, this is going on, this is what she's hearing, what should we do? My instructions as a parent were, what does your teacher say? What does your principal say? What has been the official word? Is school still on? Yes. My instructions then were, okay, then you listen to your teacher, you wait for official instructions, but as long as school is in session, you are in school. If you're not in class, get yourself to class and wait for further instructions. Your safest place is with your teacher in your classroom until we hear otherwise. And I think my concern with that is, luckily she was in a class where the teacher was present, so she could follow instructions, and she was in a classroom where if the need were to be, the door could be locked and we could do the things that we know happen if the threat is more serious. I think my question at this point is, my security and giving my kid that instruction moving forward, I would like to know if that's still the correct instruction, and can I still trust that I can just hand my kiddo over and she's not going to just be left behind. I think that is the main thing. I understand I I'm in a position of trust myself, and I work in a place that is not free from potential threats also. And while I'm also not obligated to, as I've heard recently, jump in front of a bullet for somebody else, I do feel it's important being in a position of trust, being in a place where I have badge access to places other people might not. So I do have the ability to not only get myself to a place of safety, but to help others to a place of safety. And my main thing is I want to make sure when I drop my kiddo off that she's going to be handed off to someone with that same mindset. So that's going to be kind of what I'm asking for clarification about tonight. But, you know, as far as the leadership at Loveland High goes, I have no concerns, I have no reservations. I'm very pleased with how things have gone the last couple years, and looking forward to them being much the same, because we've very much enjoyed it.
Thank you, Dawn.
Thank you.
Very much. Right, up next is Jen Schneider, followed by Angela Diaz. You pass, okay. Okay, sounds good. So Angela Diaz.
Okay, so I have a freshman and a senior here, and I dropped my freshman off. My senior was driving himself. And by the time I got back to my work, which is only like not even 10 minutes away, my phone had blown up with over 15 text messages from my kids telling me something was wrong and to come back. By the time I got back, I found my freshman in the parking lot hiding behind cars because his teacher had left him. And another teacher had run by and told the whole class to run. So that's what his class did. My senior couldn't get out of his class to help his brother because nobody would let him out. So my question is, how can I make sure that my kid's not going to be left to fend for himself in that kind of situation again? Because we all know it's going to happen again. My work gets threats all the time. The schools get threats all the time. But I want to make sure that my kid is not hiding under a car in the Loveland High parking lot. So up until now, I've had no problems. You've addressed all my concerns and helped me with my children every way possible, very, very fast too. I get quick response every time I've called you. So my concern isn't with you as a leader, but it's with the teachers leaving my child alone, not knowing what's going on, and another teacher running by telling them all to run.
Thank you, Angela. All right, next we have Jennifer Brandt, and after Jennifer, we have David Thomas.
Thank you. I am a grandmother. I have 8 grandchildren in the Loveland School District. And this, I actually don't have a high schooler here now, but coming up. And this has prompted what I consider to be a communication issue among many things. Would you be able to tell us how to find out the information for the school district, the plans that you have in place, an understanding that you don't want to reveal certain things, but just generally speaking, even my kids whose children are enrolled are in the dark about what happens in an emergency. And I think that's a communication issue, like I'm saying. And then who actually decides these plans? Is it you? Are there other professionals involved? Are there meetings with parents? I mean, I'm just kind of in the dark as to how the whole process even works. So I think what we need is a lot more discussion and maybe a lot more information for parents that can be reinforced and discussed with their children. Because we've all heard that whatever happened, it was not well coordinated, and I'm not blaming anyone, but just noticing that there is a real need for open discussion, communication. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. All right, next we have David Thomas, and then Bell and Lara. Okay, Bell and Lara.
I have more of an idea. Would it be possible if police officers could, like, you know how they stay at a certain location, if they locate in front of our schools, and then, you know, if they're called out on a call, they can do that, and maybe do something where they can collaborate with the police department. My son was very confused that day. Just there was not a whole lot of communication. Still don't know what happened. And I would just like some clarification on that. But that was my idea, just maybe have officers in front of the school just at all times, or maybe just out of their shift, maybe stationed in front of Loveland High for an hour or two. And just maybe that would, if there's something that happens like this again, they can have more control of the situation, and there are already be people on the scene. Because just driving to get my son, it was so chaotic. The people driving everywhere, that just the streets were not safe. We have a plan, me and my son, we do have a plan of what to do if something like this to happen. We have a meeting spot, but at that day, it was not safe for him to cross the street or anything. So that's my concern. Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Belen. And then Diane Bauerfeld, did you want to speak?
So I don't necessarily have a question for any of you. I just wanted to offer a perspective. I kind of am in a unique position because I used to be a teacher myself, and I'm married to a teacher, TSD K-8 guy, who's been here, I think, over 20 years now. And I'm also a parent. I have a junior and a freshman. And I think that unless you're kind of in that world, it can be a little bit hard to understand. Teaching is not your typical job. Administration and education is not your typical job. You don't just show up to work. I'm in the legal field. My situation's more black and white with the federal courts, but you invest so much emotionally in the kids. And so, you know, there's a vulnerability that's unique and different. And we feel so fortunate that our kids are at Loveland High School and that they're at TSD. And I just want to offer perspective of, I was scared that day too, without getting into my narrative of what happened, but we addressed it. I was working from home that day. We addressed it the best we could. But I really encourage us as parents to always assume the best. These teachers give so much, and just because you're in an administrative role doesn't mean that you're infallible and you can't make a mistake. And mistakes are such an opportunity to learn. Again, we have a really amazing school district, and I think that one thing we could do for those of you as we address the communication issues, which what you say, what people hear and what you mean, very often in communication, that's why there's wars going on, right? And so that's very common, that's a common theme. But as we address the communication issues and improve and this mistake's an opportunity, perhaps we can spin this into, you know, this really could be the best thing that ever happened to us, in all honesty, because nothing bad happened from this. And it's an opportunity to sit down and look at all the pieces and moving parts and assess it and say, hey, you know what, this happened, and because this happened, we can now look at all these pieces, and if it is go time at some point and it's game time, and hopefully it won't be, but if it is, we'll be that much more prepared. So I just wanted to offer that perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane. Okay, so that's all the people that signed up before we started. Is there anyone else who would like to provide their thoughts? And I'll go through. We have plenty of time to go through. So, ma'am, right there. And if you wouldn't mind just stating your name for us.
My name is Christine Smith, and I have twin daughters that are juniors here at Loveland High School. And I am a youth director at a local church, so I've had a lot of interactions with the different high schools that are around here, having students at multiple different high schools. With Loveland High School, we are thrilled, and I love MJ because he supports his students and he knows his students very well. He spends time to get to know them, which is rare as far as administration getting to do that, and so I respect that. My question that I have is, when that day did occur, and I did have two children that were driving separate cars, two in two different classrooms, getting two different perspectives. One having a teacher that was being very forthright and honest with them, telling them what the situation was, saying communicate with your parent, and you guys decide what you want to do. The other one keeping her inside a classroom, saying you are not allowed to leave at all. Who was very terrified at that moment, texting me back and forth. We've talked about what to do as far as us. However, I have a problem with the way the district handled it and the way the police department did. The police department gave full communication, exactly what happened. All the communication that you gave, I applaud you. It was forthright, it was honest, it was straightforward. However, with the district and the information that came out, it was, oh, it's this first, or it was a text message of scheduled disruption. There was no text that ever stated there was a threat that was not credible and that was what the cause was. Never. You had to open an email, you had to get a phone call to tell you. And again, this was hour after kids have arrived at school and been there. So when I'm getting information from the police department and seeing things, but the information I'm getting from the district is totally different, there is some communication that is not happening there. And I applaud basically the police department. Thank you so much for being transparent about what you're doing and getting that out there.
Thank you. Okay, yes. Yep, Adina Red.
Good evening, I'm Jeannie Finley. I spent over 30 years in this district as a teacher and administrator. My husband, over 30 years, 4 children, 2 grandchildren already graduated, 2 are everybody's at Loveland. My question is, and I applaud those who talked about teaching is not a normal job. We need to go home too. Police officers need to go home too. Communication is key. I can, with all the people I've talked to, I can't get an answer as to where was the district office. I was a director of K-12 education in Weld RE4 during the tornado. We were dispatched from district office in any crisis, whether it was a tornado or threat or the pipes froze and the elementary school is closed. We went to support our buildings. We went to support our teachers, our administrators, every child in the district. What could be so important that our district office, according to what I know, wasn't there? During the Windsor tornado, I was dispatched to a couple elementary schools. Jeannie, these are your schools. I go out in the parking lot. My car is like destroyed. I go back in. Where should I go now? You're in charge of Windsor Middle. You're in charge of Windsor High School. At the tail end of a tornado, I am going to those buildings. I am in the tunnels with those middle school kids. That is our responsibility of a district office. That is where the leadership is. We need to support everybody in every building, and it starts at central office. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeannie. Okay, if you could just raise your hand. Yes, ma'am, right there on the end.
Good evening, and thank you for having us again. My name is Ruth Buxton, and I have 6 kids in the Thompson School District, and I second what many have said, where I have been grateful for everything I've seen teachers, administrators do. My concern is, like others though, with the district communication. I had 2 at Loveland High that day, 1 at Irwin. By 1 o'clock, I was so out of sorts of what I should be doing, because I get the report from Loveland High, my kids, saying that's all crumbling and chaos. Then I get an email just saying Irwin's on a secured perimeter. And then 2 days later, and I don't know obviously all the protocols that go into an investigation. But when I got the email that said MJ had been put on paid administrative leave, I since learned that that means it's just an investigation has to happen. But I think the lack of communication from the district is what makes it just heightens everything, because I thought he was taking the fall for this because I didn't know what paid administration leave means. So I'm curious, my question is, what is the district going to do differently to communicate these very serious situations? Maybe it couldn't happen sooner, but in a different way, every detail can't be given, but just along the way, letting us know, like, you are in touch with what people are experiencing and what the parents are going through, and addressing a little bit more, a little earlier throughout that, because like she said, having to open, like just getting these texts like secured perimeter and then the calls, like it was very confusing. So what is the district going to do differently in the future to communicate better during these crisis situations? Thank you.
Thank you. Is there, yes, ma'am.
Hi, thanks for having us. My name is Jessica Graves. I have a 10th grade student at Loveland High. My question is kind of echoing some of the other parents. Mainly, I'm curious what the process is in place for deeming a threat, whether credible or not, and how that is communicated, and whether or not it's decided to be communicated or not to the parents. One of my main concerns was that I didn't find out until after the classes had been canceled already, and I actually had to reach out to my student who was in a panic, saying he was trying to get out of the school because he was being told to leave, and so that was very scary. And I just don't understand why that wasn't communicated or how it was deemed not credible before the school day, which I understand that that's what happened, but why was it decided to not communicate that but to the parents, but it was to the staff? And then my other question is, I would like to have some transparency about what the emergency response practices currently are, and if changes are going to be made to improve upon that for the future so that this sort of situation doesn't happen again. And if it does, and it is a serious situation, that the kids know what to do and that we know what to do as parents of how to help support the staff and not have a chaotic and scary situation. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Yes, ma'am.
Actually, I've never done this. I'm Fanny. I spoke to a lot of you, actually, and honestly, everybody, every department blamed each other. And then also, I appreciate your apology today, and I don't think it was fully on you. The higher district people have never really apologized on this subject, so that kind of still hurts. Appreciate having this meeting. And then also, I heard that you guys aren't practicing a lot of drills, so maybe more practice, and then also maybe practice a drill during lunch, where it's more an open space. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Hi there, my name is Melissa Pascucci. I have a 10th grader here at Loveland High School. Just for a little background, we came from private school and we've been very happy with the education. And Mr. James, certainly appreciate your leadership, and we're glad that you've been reinstated. And I also appreciate the opportunity to speak with you all today. I think that was really something that was on my heart when this happened, and so again, I I'm just very grateful for this time. Similar to what you've probably heard already, I'm a registered nurse. I certainly, as a nurse, didn't sign up to be in dangerous situations, but the Nursing Code of Ethics requires that I don't abandon my patients. And so I know that obviously nursing is different than teaching, and I guess I'd like some reassurance from the district, from the school, that there is a policy and a procedure in place, that I know that when I send my child to school and there is a threat or a concern, that there are staff who will honor their duty and their commitments, and follow policy and procedures to make sure that the students are safe. Because what it sounded like was it was a very chaotic environment, and I think staff or teachers leaving actually really added to that, and that is very disappointing. Again, I get that teaching is difficult, and I appreciate that, but so is nursing, so is working at a bank or a grocery store these days. Unfortunately, that is our society. So again, just a little bit more transparency about really what transpired that day, why those teachers left, and what will happen if this occurs again in the future, that we as parents can trust that staff will remain and make sure that our students are safe. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Good evening. Thank you for having us. Josh Prem is the name. I appreciate the time with you guys. That day was super frustrating for me, and I wanted to say that as a 20-year plus resident of Loveland, I've lost a lot of hope with our police department, but I know our new changing guard brings us new hope. So it was a great thing to see, as I work in law enforcement as well, that this was handled well and efficiently up front. So thank you for that. On the other side, though, and it was all resolved before school started, if I'm not mistaken, and like some others echoed, I'm going to say it as well, it would have been nice to know that there would have been a threat and that would have been resolved before the kids showed up and the doors were closed. And when I heard that MJ was suspended, I'm like, unless there's something else that I don't know, which is very possible, in my opinion, he wasn't the one that should have been suspended for this. It would have been the communication, the person responsible for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there, yes, ma'am.
I hate speaking in front of people. My name is Andrea Dimmitt, and I do have a sophomore here as well. I want to know how we are going to empower our children to step forward to this occasion. We do have a unique opportunity to include them. I think a lot of times as adults, we make decisions for our kids, but why are we not bringing these kids and asking them how they would have wanted it done? Why are we not, they're the leaders, they're the people that we're building. My daughter is very high anxiety. This situation was, it was hard for her, you know. I had to listen to her the next day, not want to go to school, and I did make her go, but literally as she's walking out the door, a little angry, she asked me whose responsibility it was going to be if she was shot that day. I don't want to answer that question. I don't want her thinking that she's coming to school and having to face that. So I think we have a unique opportunity to build a group of students and to hear their perspective from this, and not just the parents. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there, oh, yes, sir.
Hi, good evening. My name's Corey Martin. I have a freshman here at Loveland, and my question is, based on the information provided, was that the threat was called in at 8:12, and by 8:30, you had already deemed it not a credible threat. What kind of investigation can you do in 18 minutes when it's this serious? And then to not tell the teachers till 9 o'clock, another 30 minutes, when my student goes to his classroom and it's closed, there's no teacher, it's just not acceptable.
Thank you. Is there anyone? Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Good evening. My name's Elise Ramey, and I have a sophomore and a sixth grader. And the chaos that happened here caused tremendous chaos amongst communication between siblings at Irwin. I don't ever want to get a call from my youngest telling me she can't handle being at school because she doesn't feel safe. It's not okay for our children to come here and not feel safe at any school. We have to do better by them.
Thank you. All right. Is there anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name's Meg D. Clement. I have a junior here and a 8th grader at Irwin. Like a lot of people, I heard from my daughter that morning. She said that she didn't feel safe, that she didn't know what was going on, she wanted to leave. And I said, fine, because we don't live in a world anymore where I can say, calm down, don't worry, I'm sure it'll be fine, because I can't guarantee that's true. My questions are ultimately about policy. What is the district policy for communication? Communication to the school, communication to the teachers, and then communication to the parents, because there was zero. I would like to understand specifically what the administrative leave for the principal was based on. What was the investigation into? What was the nature of it? What actions, if any, have been taken for the teachers that made their own choice that morning? I kept hearing, I've heard over and over that it was a confusing time, that it was a hard time, it was the late start, it was staff meeting. I know there was a large meeting for the district, I think out at the ranch. There was a breakfast that morning. I don't know if that lent itself to the confusion, but it's never going to be at a perfect time. If this happens, it's going to be at the worst time possible. Anyone would plan that, unfortunately. My child doesn't feel safe here. Not really. I asked my 8th grader the other day if he felt safe going to school. He said, well, I never feel safe going to school, but, I'm going. So, I think that's the nature of going to school right now in this world, and that's unfortunate. My child specifically doesn't feel safe here. There was an incident last year. There were police and dogs in the building searching for something. They were not on lockdown. She didn't have any information then. She has told me she does not feel safe in this school. That's the reality we're living in. We don't know anything about the policy. We don't know enough about the procedures. We need more information on that. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Are there any other individuals who'd like to speak? Okay. So let's do this. Laura Lee is going to bring me the list. She's been writing down some notes around the questions that you've been asking, and she's going to bring that up to me, and then we will read those aloud, and then we will answer them for you. Sure, absolutely.
So I'm Chrissy Lockard. I'm actually a teacher in the district. I know most of you. Part of my decision to get up is because I was also trying to get my daughter, who is a student at Loveland High, to stand up and say something. So step out of your comfort zone. My concern was, being a teacher, of course, I know what our protocols are. And from my perspective, it looked like we followed protocol. What threw me off at work and that gave me anxiety was when the call was made to cancel school, because that's not typical when when it's not credible, which I later found out. We can't run school when we don't have staff. But that was the part that was more shocking to me, and it kind of made me wonder, what do we do and what is our plan for the future when we have staff that feel like that? Because we are entering a different place. Like schools have become just across the nation more unsafe. We're looking at different kinds of threats than we had before. And I mean, I think this happened to spark a whole spur of safe details, you know, throughout our community. And what do we do for the subs that are in the building that don't know what to do because they're not part of typical protocol? That's kind of what sparked my anxiety and kind of like, how can we move forward? And then for her, I mean, we were lucky. She had a teacher who stayed with her and she felt fine at school. But then the Irwin incident amped up anxiety because she had her friends texting her that were worried about their siblings at Irwin. And so that was the other thing that kind of popped up for me that seemed odd with the Loveland High situation, because I felt like our communication was standard and like I understood what was happening. But the Irwin situation seemed to be much different, and so that piece stood out to me as to why they looked different, even though they happened the same day. So, thank you.
Thank you. All right, so in just a moment here, we'll get the questions and we'll go forward. All right. Oh, thanks. Okay. So, as I said, Laura Lee has recorded all the questions that were asked. She's also tried to group things a little bit down into themes to also make it a little bit easier for us to kind of address these things by topic as much as possible. So, I'm going to start here. Among the main topics, the first one, why was the reaction of the staff and the students so different this time compared to others? And I don't know who we want to address this here, but.
All right, so I'll say what was different. There's situational dynamics in every safety issue we have. But I guess before I go there, I do want to, there's been a lot of comments about district and what we haven't done. I do want to personally apologize. We all take responsibility for what happened. I have kids in the district that have gone through the district, I have kids, and that morning was not what it should be. So we do recognize that and acknowledge that. There are several steps we're taking, to learn, because in any situation in safety, whether it's this situation, other tragedies in the community, that's our opportunity to learn. So I know that that doesn't fix the chaos of that morning, but we are learning from that. So yes, there is an apology. It shouldn't have happened like that. There shouldn't have been chaos. Why was this different? First, I'll go to, I think, some of the timing, which might answer a couple other questions, is we did have the Safe Tell at 8:12. That comes into the safety department, it hits Loveland Police Department, and then it hits the school administration. So simultaneously, Safe to Tell, hits all those individuals at once. We then take that information, and really the process is to work with Loveland PD to understand the threat. This threat was a non-elevator risk prior to kids going. So I do want to underscore that, because there has been staff meetings and questions about students as we met with students today. And that was, I want to underscore that we knew there was a non-credible threat prior to school starting. Maybe a second here I can read as we get through some questions. I don't mind reading the actual verbiage of Safe to Tell so you can understand, why the investigation happened within minutes and why it was determined that way. But the difference of I would say this one, each one is different. LEMS that later in the afternoon was different. This was different in a communication breakdown, to be transparent and truthful in what we heard. There was a communication breakdown between when we were investigating the threat, between the staff meeting, when there was information given there, and then when we said, okay, let's regroup and talk about it, you know, there was that, I'll say, chaos that already ensued. So I don't know if that answered the question why that makes it different, but it was different because every situation in safety and incidents is so different. And the learning part is, you know, the communication between staff, you know, so we are working hand in hand with staff when this is happening. You know, that's what we're looking at now, and how can we train and look at that differently. Yeah, maybe the next question, I'll pull it up, yeah.
What was different for me that morning in my decision-making was what was happening in the world, and the two major incidents that had happened within a week. For me, that had to do with my choices that I made and the way that I communicated. In the end, we look back, that's a major, major move forward, fix. That part of the staff meeting, I think, was confusing for my staff looking back. And I didn't realize that until the chaos was happening from about 9 to 9:15. I will tell you several times I said to myself, this is different because two major tragedies have taken place, and our people's minds, our kids' minds, our staff's minds, our families' minds are in a different place.
You good? Oh, you want me? Okay.
Yeah, so this was the narrative that came in. I got told by someone there was going to be a school shooting today. So not site specific. That's how the investigation, by the time we got it to clearing it, we, along with LPD, who really takes charge of the investigation, deemed it non-credible because that was a similar type safe to tell and comment being made, just not here, but in other states around the country. So that's why, you know, I mentioned each situation's dynamic and different. This one, you know, how it read was very similar to other ones, and we can have LPD comment on how they investigate, but that's why the timing from, you know, X to X ended up being how it was. And that was the extent of the safe to tell.
I can also say that when there lacks any specificity for us to investigate, that is a bit of a clue. Additionally, we reach out to the district attorney's office, and when appropriate, they'll grant us a search warrant to ascertain from which computer was that communication sent. This particular threat did not raise to the level where the district attorney's office would provide us a search warrant. So that dovetailed well with what was just explained in terms of this was similar to other wordings that wasn't specific and not even mentioning Loveland High School.
Okay. The next question is, and these are kind of tied together. One is, how is the district going to communicate going forward? And also, going forward, how do parents get information, i.e. where to go? How do they get information themselves? And I can talk a little bit about that. I don't know if anyone else has anything to add. Okay, sure. So what I can tell you is that the district will always communicate regarding credible threats that are impacting a school or impacting a school schedule or the impact for that school to be open. We will always communicate that. And what we always will do is we'll share the information that we are able to share at that time. So for example, in the email communication regarding this that went out, it said that there had been a tip that had been called in and it had been investigated and that it had been deemed to be non-credible and that all students and staff and visitors were safe, but that due to the schedule disruption in the building, the classes were going to be scheduled for that, or going to be canceled for the day. At that time, that was the That was the total amount of information that we were able to share. One of the things we have to be very careful about is that we do not release information that makes it more difficult for our law enforcement partners to do their job and to do what they're trying to do behind the scenes. And so we will always put out what we can, but oftentimes we're just not able to put out things at the level of detail that I as a parent would like to get, and that I know many of our families would like to get as well. We will oftentimes circle back, though, and try to then provide some follow-up information. And that was the goal of that follow-up communication then that was sent later on at the end of the day, that then contained a copy of the press release, which at that time then the Loveland Police Department had been able to put together, which had more details that simply just weren't available early in the morning when we were able to do that. But as I said, we will always put out the information we can. The last thing I would also say is that communication is an ever-evolving process, and it's not perfect. And I'm always looking for ways for myself and for my team to better improve our practices and to do a better job of connecting with our students and our families and our staff members. And that is something that we're always aware of, and it's something that we will constantly strive to do. I've never been able to send out a perfect message. There's always something. You can never write a message that it totally answers all the questions that everybody always has, but we're never perfect, but we'll always strive to be perfect as much as we can.
So the district enjoys a very strong relationship with the Loveland Police Department, our SRO team, as well as with Larimer County Sheriff's Office. One of the things, one of our opportunities that we want to continue calibrating around is communication, so that we are in tandem with law enforcement. I would much rather piggyback off of a communication with LPD or Larimer County than for us to lead in the story. In fact, oftentimes we're told, don't lead, follow our lead. And so we are tightening that calibration. That is an opportunity. That is something with, certainly with new leadership. We've elevated that, we've illuminated that as a clear opportunity and priority. Because we do want to be absolutely transparent. We want to be very clear in our communication, and most importantly, we want to be saying the same thing. I'm also a parent in this district too. So I'm not only the superintendent, but I'm a parent, I'm a community member. And I absolutely believe wholeheartedly in transparency. We want to be very clear. We don't want to hide anything. But what we also know about communication is that it needs to not only be timely, but it has to be accurate. And once you push out communication, you can't take that back. And so we want to be super careful. So there's that sweet spot, right, with communication, because if you're too slow, we hear about it. If we're too fast, might not be a good thing. So we're trying to thread that needle, but I hear you clearly. Communication is an ongoing opportunity. We strive for perfect. We are not there. We will continue working towards that, but I hear and appreciate everything that many of you shared this evening.
Okay. The next question, how do we know that our students are safe in the classroom, and how do we know students will not be left in the classroom alone without teachers?
It stems a lot about what a lot of the questions were about the policy and procedures we have. When you look at what we practice, the drills, the mandated drills we do, there's opportunity there. As we talked to student council today, one of the things we asked is what can we do different? They said, let's do, as we heard here tonight, let's do drills during lunch or activities to understand what that feels like. So it's not robotic, but it feels different each time because each issue is different. We have the policies and practice and the procedures in place, and following those, you should feel comfortable. That's what's worked in every other situation we've had across the district. So there was a lot of question about, well, then why do we not call a lockout or secure perimeter or a hold? We knew at the time that there wasn't a elevated risk, so that's why nothing was called. So because nothing was called, the regular day should have ensued. Obviously, we're not, I'm not talking about what happened and why it didn't, but if we follow the policies and practices we have in place and what we practice, your kids are safe. I mean, your kids are our kids, and my kids are in the district. So we're all in this together to follow this policy and practice that we do. But what we are doing is learning, as we talk to students today, to say what can we do different in our drills, proms, homecomings, and it's an evolution. So we're continuing to evolve. And like I said, it's not just about this issue, it's about all the chaos and tragedies that are happening around the country. We have to adapt and learn and be flexible. And, there was no issue, true safety issue here. And that's why there was no other, I would say, SRP, the standard response protocol, issued, because there was no elevated risk.
Couple things. Todd keeps referring to talking to students. We actually met with the Loveland High School Student Council today. So I met myself and Todd. We went and nearly 60 kids. They are a powerful group and they are awesome. And so we deeply engaged with them. They asked some really good questions. We also have district level student advisory groups at the high school, middle school, and elementary levels. We have upcoming meetings with them, and we do engage students directly because kids have a front row seat to everything that's going on. And to one of the points that were made, kids have brilliant ideas. Sometimes, we do a great job talking about them and around them, but if we talk with them, we can really learn a lot. And so certainly as a former, I'm an educator. I've been in education for 30 years. I'm a former teacher. I'm actually a former student council advisor. But I'm in education because I like being with kids. And we learned a lot from them today. With regards to safety and learning, we do a lot of professional development. And we front load it at the start of the year, but we also continue doing boosters throughout the year. And in light of every opportunity, every time we have an incident, every time we have something that we can learn from, we reflect on that, and then we re-engage with our staff. And so even this week, there was professional development provided here at Loveland High School for the administrative team. We'll be providing PD for our building leadership at the elementary, middle, and high school levels this week and next week. So we're not waiting. It's not something that let's take this on over the summer or wait till next year. We'll do it now. So if we're always learning and we're evolving. Again, we work very closely with law enforcement. As incidents unfold, unfortunately, throughout the country, we learn each time, and then we apply our learnings to our standards, practices, and protocols. We do have procedures and policies in place. We do drill them, we do practice them, and then it's fluid. So we're always updating and upgrading them, and then we're training in process. So I think we do an excellent job. But we can do a better job. And so it's about continuous improvement because safety and security is a non-negotiable. And so that is a top priority. I mean, it's more than words, it's deeds because we pay attention to it constantly.
All right, so the next question, who puts the safety protocols together, and can parents and community members be involved?
I'll let Todd take this in a second. So one of our opportunities and one of our commitments as a school district is we are going to be forming an advisory committee where we will be engaging parents, community members, and students to not only help inform perspective, but to really dig in with us. So we want to engage. I know there's a lot of individuals that want to be involved, and so we have that commitment. And so that is one of the things that we are currently formulating. We're going to be working closely with Larimer County as well as LPD, but please be looking for information on that shortly.
I want to add something to that as well. And Diane, you had mentioned this. No one wants to hear from us that we're going to get better from the mistakes we made in an incident, following an incident like this. But we already are stronger. We're already looking at what were the flaws within our own systems. We've already sat down this week since Monday when I've gotten back, and our team has gone over several different scenarios and how do we strengthen this, and where is that for us as a building? This happened. Wow, we never thought about that. I hate the concept that you got to go through it once to learn it, right? So that's why that practicing is so important. The lockout, the secure the perimeter, the lockdown, the holds, going through those are really important for kids and staff to understand what they are. And the more you do them, the better it is. So when something happens and it's the real thing, we've practiced it. We're still going to find flaws. But our protocols and our practices, they're not there yet as of today on Thursday, but they're getting there. We're already working on them.
As far as the question is who puts these in place, it's bigger than just us in the schools. You know, it's a community. When I say that, it's LPD, it's Larimer County, it's state level. So we're in state committees, we're in actually national conferences. So this is such a complex and dynamic subject that we're all studying and learning that it takes us all. So for example, our response protocols is not something TSD put together. That comes from a national level recommendation. So it is, not one entity, but it's learning from several entities, state groups too. We're involved in school district safety committees, that meet as a group. So all of us get together and talk about the different topics of the day. So it's not just about, us putting practices in and just communicating, but it's understanding and learning from everyone who's really working on this same system together.
Okay, the next question was about where the district office staff was during that time in order to help provide support to students and staff.
So we had multiple people from the district here, and I was one of those people. I was helping navigate conversations with parents in the parking lot. I was helping facilitate the organization of the district support for Loveland High School. I was also supporting with teachers that had questions on the spot, also district level administrators with questions. And I was also supporting Michael James with what his actions and what his steps needed to be on that day, and helping him support his staff after school meeting with the planning of that meeting. So I was the person that was one of the main people on the site here helping with the organization of the situation.
I had come over the intercom and again mentioned, here's what we need to do. If you have a ride and you're able to get a hold of them, rides can come pick you up. If you have a vehicle, you may leave the campus. The buses were coming back within 15 minutes of us making that announcement. So for those students to go on the east side of the school, and then for students waiting to go into the cafeteria. That is a point of that we could have improved following what happened, right? Let's get more people out where the kids were. I think we had them on the inside supports. We had them near the buses. We had people in the cafeteria talking to kids and making sure. Another big learning piece was our ILC students who are severe special needs. I do remember us on the radio and making sure that group of students were in the right place to get them. So I remember us going all over the place, kind of supporting where needed. But you're right, like in the parking, in the moving around the building, it was quite chaotic. So that was definitely a point that we could improve.
All right, the next question, there were a couple around this, around how a threat is deemed to be credible or not, what that process looks like.
So I touched upon this earlier about examining the actual wording of the threat and aligning it with what we've seen in the past and nationally. If there is if there's no specificity, nothing to investigate, if there's misspellings, I think one that came in this week, spelled the word bomb, B-O-M. If there are things that would lead us to believe it is a prank or there is something just to, the old days of pulling the fire alarm are past us. So when there is a system and there's an anonymous system, oftentimes there's very little to nothing to go on. So we look at past practice and see if there are things that we can do. Now, the Loveland Police Department takes every one of these seriously. As was described, it doesn't go just to one person. It goes into our dispatch, which is 24 hours a day. They are able to start doing an investigation based on the countless databases that are available to them. Our investigations team gets it at the same time that the SRO sergeant and the SRO team get it. So everyone is pulling to look at these immediately. So to say that it was 18 minutes to make this determination, I would submit the determination might have been even quicker on this one. But we do have to take every one of them serious. So were officers doing drive-bys, meaning being in the area of schools more? Yes. Did I have officers committed to doing overtime or not leaving at the end of their shift so they could be in the areas of the schools? Absolutely. So there's a number of things that roll into place, and it's second nature to us to respond in that kind of manner. But I also want to applaud those in the audience who recognize that teaching is a evolving profession, and it's not an easy one. The days of just teaching math are behind us. I mean, they are protectors, they are counselors, they are just like being parenting now. It is not like it used to be when you were having to deal with these threats. And I have 5 children myself, and I do have a high school sophomore. And so dealing and speaking with them along the many things that are happening in the national perspective is a challenging road for all of us to walk. I can say that if you remember the Washington, D.C. sniper situation, so in my previous position, I was a special agent with the FBI, and I was in Washington, D.C., and I was intimately involved in that investigation, and the entire community was afraid to go out and put gas in their car because so many of the shootings were associated with gas stations. And so kids were not out in the yards. Schools were virtually, shut down at times because of recent shootings. So this is something that is not just this year. It's, been ongoing for the last 20 years. And there's a lot of scar tissue in this room. There is a lot, when you see what's going on or what happened in Nashville or Uvalde, how can it not touch the heart of you, and how can that not bleed over into the hearts of your children? So we're very, very sympathetic to that, and that's why we take these very, very seriously.
Just the other piece I would add is the collaboration between us and LPD. I mean, we work on that really daily because of these situations. So it's good to know here and understand that our partnership with not only LPD but the Laramie County Sheriff's Office is exceptional. I mean, with the care that they take, the same care that we take, and these decisions that are made together in partnership.
Good. Okay. Next question. Could police officers be located in front of the schools? There was a question around law enforcement presence in front of the buildings.
So it's often described when police are present out in the front, it presents a more unattractive target for someone who wants to do harm. So I agree with the sentiment that if you have an officer out front, it does increase the safety of a school. But as you all know, this school, where's the front again? Because there are so many different sides, and how many entrances are being used by students. I touched on earlier that our patrol team is aware of these threats because our dispatch center gets it simultaneously. So they do put this out, and our officers then are trying to do their best to cover the many schools in the district. And as you know, we have SROs at the middle and the high schools, and they have a heart for children, they have a heart for safety, they have a heart for education. They're accommodating, like I had mentioned earlier, teachers are trying to be not just teaching the subject, but also being counselors and so many other roles. The police officers are doing the exact same thing. We're mental health professionals, we're friends, we're mentors, we're counselors, we're educators, and so we like to say that we're as much a part of the school district as the teachers and the administrators, and we're happy and proud to be here.
Okay. Next question, how do we empower our students and get their input from their experience?
So as I shared, and I think Michael can extend on this as well, again, the voices of our students are absolutely critical in this process. And again, spent part of the afternoon engaging with Loveland High School student council members, nearly 60 of them. That was great. We do have many schools have principal advisories where groups of students will meet with building leadership to provide perspective, feedback, and input as well. And then at the district level, we've elevated voices as well by having periodic meetings with high school, middle, and elementary students. In fact, our next meeting is next week. We'll be engaging our high school students in this topic, safety and security. And I've invited the Board of Education to join, as well as all of the high school principals. So we want to make sure that students feel valued, that we're elevating their voices, and that we take them seriously when they speak to us. And so during our advisory, I make sure that I have my senior leadership team available. They get to select the topics that are of interest to them, but we also select topics, things that maybe we're working on in the district that we want student perspective and feedback. So they are necessary and critical stakeholders, especially in this area around safety and security. And again, their ideas are unique and brilliant often.
I think, as you know, I returned Monday, and a real big goal for me this week was to be visible, was to see my students, was to reconnect and move forward, and to get back to a little ounce of normalcy. That was really important for me this week. However, I do love the idea of not a listening session per se, but more like a student action session where students can sign up to come and talk and be heard about the incident and how they felt during that incident, and maybe even share where they were and what happened to them, and how can we tighten up on some of those pieces, and what are those unsaid rules that should be present that we maybe haven't thought of that come from a student perspective. And when that question was posed, I don't remember who asked it, but thank you. I was thinking that right away. I was thinking, a nice half day or a couple days of some student circles that they're able to give their input and hear their voice. I think that is absolutely relevant right now.
I was going to save this for closing remarks, but I'll share it now. There isn't a staff member at Loveland High School that doesn't care deeply about each and every child in that building, and that is every staff member. It's not just the teachers, it's the administrators, it's the custodians, it's those that work food services. Every individual is all in for kids. And I would say that even at senior leadership level, the majority of my cabinet are former teachers, educators, principals. We're in it for kids. And so we care deeply as our building leaders do and our teachers do, because we get it. And it's not an easy job, and that's okay. I mean, we know what we signed up for. It's complicated. It gets more and more complicated in the world that we're in. But at our core, we're still about kids. And so everything we do, every decision we make is anchored around that. And so I think our community understands that, But it's super important that we're good people doing hard work. and that's at the school level here at Loveland High School. Amazing individuals, amazing professionals that care deeply about children. No one wants to make bad decisions. Everyone is trying to act nobly and earnestly and sincerely. They're working really hard. And we are too at the district. We're a team. You know, we work in tandem in collaboration and cooperation. And so, those are just words that I wanted to express because I think it's important to know that here in this school district, I'm proud as superintendent because we really care about the kids.
Okay, next question was a question around the amount of time it took for the investigation of the incident itself. What kind of an investigation could happen in only 18 minutes? And then question regarding the gap in time with teachers not then being notified for another 30 minutes. So it's really kind of around the timeline of that day.
Yeah, I think the first piece was addressed just with the legitimacy of the safe to tell. The timeline, we received the safe to tell at 8:12. All morning it was deemed not credible from sources. So as we were moving through and we were talking to different people, whether it be LPD or our own district security, one decision that I made was announcing to staff at the end of the meeting because I didn't want it to be the first thing we talked about because it was non-credible. So, hey, you know, this threat took place. In explaining that, and it was the last 5 minutes, that's where a lot of confusion came out. So a lot of confusion came out to staff during that time frame. That wasn't the intention. And there's lots of different things. Like there's lots of different things you grab at. I was thinking about this when you were mentioning earlier about visibility of LPD. Do you have visibility on a day when there's a non-threat? And right away, when there's a big threat like that, visibility comes, and I would support that. Like, oh, sure, people are going to hear, people are going to know that there was a threat, non-credible or not. If it was credible, we wouldn't be there. We would be going through the steps that we needed to vacate the building or go on lockdown. But in that circumstance, some people are like, well, why did you have high visibility of law enforcement, right? So it goes both ways. There's so many parts of this that go both ways that I question over and over again in my mind, you know, do I tell my staff at all that there's a non-credible threat? That was a question that I had that morning. And I think I went back to that thought that I had many times, like our world is so awful right now in this week with the different pieces that happened. I think within the timing, I left it at the end because it was not credible, but I didn't take the time to really look and assess my staff before we got up and left that room to see if there was confusion. And the number one thing that I could have done is following that piece of the staff meeting was reiterated what I had started that part with and said, just remember, it's non-credible. Repeat myself, kind of like how any good teacher would at the end of class. The things that they want them to know and the things they want them to leave with, that's my number one mistake, is not stopping right there, recognizing there was confusion. I didn't see it. And then I left to go work with the people that were there to support me and to kind of move forward and, you know, yeah, there's visibility here. Let's meet people and get people where they need to be. And then that's when that chaos began. So I don't know if that answers the question kind of about the timeline, but it certainly brings in a couple of those decisions as to like the timing of when we shared that. That's one of the things I own. And the thing is, I can't say that I would change some of the things I did in that moment. I don't know if I would change when I did it in the meeting. I still don't know if that's something I would change, but that's not what this is about.
Good. Right, the last two are kind of grouped together is about why there was a difference in what the police report versus what the district reported, and also the district policy on communication. So I could add a few words real quick, and if there's anything anyone else wants to add too. So as I said, we as a district will always communicate around credible threats that are going to be impacting the school community, whether it be a classroom or the campus itself. We will always communicate around that. But as I said, the amount of information that we have available that we're able to share at that time is often not as detailed as I wish I could share, and often not as detailed as what is able to be publicly released. Because as I said, we need to make sure, Dr. Schaefer alluded to this earlier too, we have to communicate very well, and we have to communicate really clear, and we have to make sure that what we put out there is accurate, because that first one is the key one that people are going to use. So as I said, we'll always include the detail level that we're able to in those communications. And then oftentimes, similar to this, we will then follow up with some more additional information later on once law enforcement has gotten further along in their process. We have a great partnership with them. I have a great partnership with all of our law enforcement partners in the area, and they're very open with sharing information with us with what they can put out, because they view us as communication partners in that. So I just wanted to explain that real quick. I don't know if there's anything else that you'd like to add.
I appreciate the clarity there as well. Now, I'm in the first 100 days of my tenure as your new chief of police, so I have pledged to the community, to my department, to city leadership, that the hallmark of my tenure here would be transparency and accountability. So it is incumbent upon me to share everything that I possibly can, and I believe that our team did that. We also had the luxury of a little more time and a more, an ability to examine all of the safe to tell notifications that came in. I would hesitate to even characterize them as threats, since at the end of the day, after all the investigation was done, certainly that is when we can say it's not credible. So I hope the community understands that this is a future, what you'll see in your Loveland Police Department.
Yes, sir.
Hi, my name's David Thomas, and I am curious about one thing. First off, I really appreciate your sincerity. I really, you've really touched me here tonight. And but I am curious about one thing. How, like, if you could say, is there some accuracy statistic about the assessment of whether a threat is credible or not? Like, if it's 95% accurate in making that, are people happy, or something like that? In other words, I mean, because we're all sort of, our kids' lives are depending on that.
So on that particular day, the accuracy of the information that came in was 0%. So we had 7 that came in over the course of a couple of days, and none of them were deemed accurate or appropriate. But over the course of the Safe to Tell system, you have to understand that this is a system that really was designed to assist the students in being able to share some of their concerns for other students. So I feel my friend is being bullied. She was sexually assaulted. Things that really are not what we would never want to share, because everyone deserves that privacy. So that particular bucket of information would be extremely accurate. It's when they come in and have a disruptive, fake bomb threat, as an example, that we would say in those instances, I'm very thankful that the percentage of those is quite low, if not 0% here in the city of Loveland.
Okay, thank you.
Sure, yeah, that's fine. So, yeah, that's fine. So, yeah, so I just wanted to just say we did our best to kind of group all those together. If we made an error someplace and if there's something specific that we didn't cover, please just let me know because we do want to make sure we answer that for you. So go ahead, ma'am.
So I asked how. I'm not faulting anybody for leaving or anything like that, because I don't think anybody knows what to do unless we're really in that situation. Like, you can prepare all you want, but until we're there, nobody's gonna know how we're gonna react. So I'm not faulting the teacher for leaving my student. I just wanna know how I can make sure and communicate with him that he's not gonna be left alone. And if the teacher does leave, is there a procedure for the children to follow or something put in place so my kid isn't left alone? My kid is huge. He's 6 foot. He looks like an adult. He's 14. He thinks like a 9-year-old. He's a boy. There's no common sense. So he fled out into a parking lot, and when he got into my truck, he went, that was probably the stupidest place I could have ran, was the parking lot. Because if a shooter's out there, he's in the parking lot. He understood he did wrong, but he also had another teacher telling him to run. So is there a procedure that if a teacher does leave the classroom and leaves the students, those students follow a different procedure, or what is in place for those kids that got left?
I think it's a great question. First thing I want to say is being a former teacher, former principal, parent, hearing that students were underneath a car, scared, that kind of breaks my heart as an educator, thinking of what if that was my child in the parking lot hiding underneath the car, and then hearing that a teacher was saying run, right? So we learn from new information coming in and new information coming in that a teacher is saying that. That's something we definitely want to look into. I think, we had the same session with teachers that were impacted from that event on Wednesday. So listening to about 22 teachers and kind of hearing how they felt through that whole situation that took place within 5 minutes, and the communication that took place was what it was, and there was confusion with that. I think teachers reflect as well. As we're reflecting as a district and LPD's reflecting, and we're looking at this event, teachers are doing that same event, right? Thinking, okay, so what could I have done different? If I'm a teacher that chose to leave, what were my reasons behind that, and would I do that in the future? And then what training do we have in place to really talk about this? Because this is my 25th year in education, 22 years in the district, and not seeing an event like this take place, it helps us reflect on, okay, so what happens if this would happen again, where teachers fearing for their life and they're leaving when kids are not in the building at that time. So that's the thing I want to highlight. When teachers were making that choice, kids were not in the building at that time. So just understanding where a teacher's coming from and helping prevent this in the future, teachers have to live with that decision that they made when they go back to school and their colleague next to them is somebody that stayed. So it's very reflective on our end of, if this was to happen again, what training do we have in place? What policies should we review? What things should we do with staff to kind of let them know, here's your professional responsibility during this time. This is what the expectation is. And we haven't been that specific on this is what the expectation, because at times you don't think things like this would happen. But with this event, everybody involved has learned a lot, as far as the community, as far as administration, as far as teachers, as far as students. There's a whole list of people that are learning from this, and this is how we debrief and be reflective and have an opportunity to listen to the community on your lens, because Dr. Schaefer has heard from the students with Todd, have heard from the students, we heard from the staff, we're hearing from the community, and after this debriefing and saying, so what did we hear tonight? So I think that's our learning curve on that.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Well, their concerns as a parent, having kids at home and leaving that a safety situation was taking place, and they felt for their family to leave. Others felt that if school was going to continue and this threat was taking place, that they felt that their students' safety was number one, and they felt like they were obligated to take the next steps to kind of push the idea that we're not going to be here because of the safety of our kids.
Yes, ma'am.
I have kind of a follow-up clarification question based on that. Some of the communication that came back to our family was that some of the things that my kiddo was hearing was, the phrase that came back to me was, well, some of the teachers were saying that even though they were told that the threat was not credible, they still felt unsafe and they didn't want to stay, and they knew that if they got enough teachers together to leave, that they could get the day closed. And I think that's kind of the thing that's kind of spinning back in the back of my mind is, how are we going to move forward in making those expectations clear? What do we do moving forward? And that speaks kind of back to my point of, what do I instruct my child to do and what to listen to? Because on that day, she was already in the school. She was not outside. I had dropped her off, and I was clear across town by then. And she was in the classroom because she was with a teacher who did stay. But I do know that some of my other friends who were also parents, their kids were in the hall, and my concern is more of, you know, as far as my kiddo and some of the other kiddos that we've talked to, is they weren't necessarily so worried about the threat itself because they knew that it had been found uncredible. Their concern was, but what happens, you know, we're all just standing around. If somebody decides to do something now, we're standing in the hallway, we're standing in the library, we're standing in the cafeteria that is all glass. We're very exposed. What do I tell my kid, and what did I have to tell her the next day? When as our family, we say, I understand you're nervous. I'm nervous too as a parent. I understand you don't really feel comfortable coming to school, but, you know, you guys have things in place, and in order for you guys to do your jobs, we need the kids to be listening and following directions so that the teachers don't have to also be trying to wrangle 25 kids and listen to their upper management so that they can tell the kids what to do. My question, though, is, what are my kids going to listen to if the teacher isn't there to instruct them, and what are we going to do to really solidify that? And I'm not quite getting a real clear answer on that piece. Like, what is the training going to be moving forward to make sure that all the teachers really understand what their role is and what the expectations are, so that we can reinforce that as we've been asked to do with, you know, everything else. You know, do your homework, make sure that you're dressed, don't have things in your backpack you're not supposed to do. You know, we spend a lot of time at home reinforcing what you guys ask of us to tell our kids, so that we drop off a kiddo who's ready to learn, has all their things that they need for a successful school day, to make sure that the teacher's job isn't any harder than it already is, which we know. But I kind of feel like I'm needing to hear that to be a little bit more of a reciprocal process. So I'd like to know, what are we going to do to make sure the teachers feel empowered and they really understand what their role is as well?
Okay, thank you.
So as Dr. Sievers just noted, learning from this first is step one. Step two is the trainings and different PD we're putting in place. You know, that's really where it goes. You know, we can talk about it, but we are doing it. You know, as Dr. Safer mentioned, you know, this week we started that. So foundationally, you know, make sure the foundation of what we're teaching is there, and then building on that to understand expectations, processes, and policies that we have in place, so we don't end up in, you know, a situation again. We understand the different practices and policies. So I'd reflect back to, you know, foundationally, when you go to the start of 8-12, it's trusting, you know, what Chief Duran just mentioned is the process of the non-credible, you know, and what we've learned is the community. So there's different steps and pieces to dissect and teach and learn from, and that's really what we are doing. You know, it's not that let's think about it, it's we're doing it. I mean, today we brought together all the elementary principals and started that process, talked through, said, think about this, what do you do, you know, here's scenarios, here's some steps. So it's continuing that process and culture. You know, it takes all of us, you know, community, teachers, students, district, together to, you know, create that safe environment. So that's what we are doing. It's not, you know, again, thinking about, or this is what we will do. You know, that's what we've started yesterday into today, and that work continues.
I'm just going to add, like, it's the ultimate breakdown. Like 100% of trust has been broken down at every level, right? So it's what does it look like to build that back up? And you made me think of that, just like, you know what? Like, I know you were mentioning building that back up in the teachers and looking, you know, letting the dust settle and kind of finding that reflection of, you know, what can each of us own in this? What can we learn to move forward? But we've got to identify and communicate that. When you were speaking, I was thinking of how do I rebuild the trust of the students with our building? How can I get them to want to come to school and trust that they have us? We've got to rebuild that. We've got to put some pieces in place. But it's families, it's students, it's faculty, it's administrative, it's district, and we all understand that. It's every single layer of trust and trying to find that mortar that's going to fill in the cracks and build it up with the relevance that we need for the time we're working in right now. And thank you for some of your thoughts, because that just got me moving a little bit on repairing that.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, yes, sorry.
I just want to make a comment, please. What I'm hearing is that your teachers will play that one. You talk about building trust, which is good, and it's wonderful. But you talk about building it back up, and I think there was a lack of something there that confidence in the process, confidence in education has. People are afraid they don't believe themselves, they don't trust, work that trust now. And this is what happened as far as I can see. And I think it's really important not to blame, but to just recognize that this is a problem. And people who are afraid will never respond appropriately, no matter how much they are trained. They have to be confident in the process, and that takes transparency in the process and practice. We all have to know what the process entails. But I heard something that when you said you would explain to them it was not a direct threat, somehow that didn't get communicated separately. And there's where we need to figure out, was it because they don't have confidence in something happened yet? Something is happening? Are they not confident because they're being told the truth? There's a big breakdown right there. And I just wanted to
Thank you. Yes, yes, ma'am. And I'm sorry, would you mind just coming down to the microphone? I just want to make sure everyone can hear, and so also that it shows up on our feed. Thank you.
I feel like I'm on The Price is Right. Running down. So I just wanted to dovetail MJ's thought. You were talking about the layers of trust, and I think that's really important. So I'm leaving with a lot of positive headlines tonight of that I'm hearing we care. I'm hearing we made a mistake. We admit it. We're sorry. And we're going to pivot, and we're going to learn from this, and we're going to grow. So when we go home tonight and have late dinner with our kids, if you had your wish of what we were to tell our kids when we go home, what would that wish be? And I'm hoping to specifically hear from anyone who wants to share, but specifically MJ, Dr. Schaefer, and the Chief of Police, please. I'm sorry, I forgot your name.
We do this because we love your students. When we're in, we love them before we get to know them.
I understand.
Teachers step into the classroom because they want to make a difference. Fill in the blank of the staff member position, all of us. We don't do this to mess people's days up. We don't do this to make mistakes. We don't do this to have learning opportunities. We don't want those. We want it to be right the first time. So I would say to your students that we're reflecting, we're changing, we're looking at what we do, and we're listening, and we're pivoting, and we're moving forward. And this is not easy, but trust when you walk through the doors of that school that you're safer than most places you would ever be. And I know that's not the feeling right now, but I still believe that as the leader of this building. I believe that my kids are safe when they walk in that building. I knew they were that day. The confusion didn't support that. And that's the sense that I want them to have, that sense of safety. And it's going to be hard to build that trust back up to get there, but that's what I would want kids to know, that you walk in those doors and you know that 100% of the people on that team are only there because you are there. That's what I would say.
Thank you.
I wanted to add to some of the concern around being able to trust us with your kids. And that's hugely important to me, coming from 25-year background, and much of my background is in elementary and early childhood. This situation happened with kids who are in their teens. And Thompson School District serves babies through age 21. And we serve students who have abilities and disabilities as well. And it is our commitment to be able to take a look at our safety protocols and imagine every single scenario that we can in terms of taking care of every student with every ability and every age. How do you keep babies safe? How do you keep students who are in wheelchairs safe? And being able to extend that trust to the community. And I want to echo what Dr. Siebers said around being able to take a look at the protocols and our expectations.
Thank you.
Well said by both of my colleagues. School districts exist for kids, children. They are our customers. That's why we're here. And in addition to preparing our students to be college, career, and community ready, we're also responsible for their physical safety and their emotional safety. And now more than ever, it's incumbent on us as adults to be role models, to be examples, but to be humans and to be approachable and empathetic and understanding. And so the message is that students have advocates in our 2,700 employees. Students have the individuals who choose to go into education in any aspect of it. It's a choice because there are many other professions, and this is it's a difficult profession. It's a challenging profession. It's my mind the best profession there is because we get to work with kids, and so it's having the trust and the confidence in those that work with them each and every day that we have at our heart and our core, our best hopes for their dreams or aspirations, what they can become, and that's why we exist.
Thank you.
So Diane, it's a great question, and I would say that if I were to go home, and I did, and talk to my son about this, to be sympathetic to the fact that teachers are not first responders. They are teachers first and foremost, and that I was issued my first vest and first gun in 1984. I've had so many leadership repetitions. For me to hear what would be characterized as a non-credible threat is, for me, what I hear it every day. If a teacher hears this for the first time, let's be sympathetic to those teachers that they're afraid too. So the amount of training that we need to do to even tabletop, let's just talk through this, is so valuable. What would you do? Would you walk out on your children? No teacher would say, yes, I would immediately walk out on their child. But situations occurred where that got out to the press, or that got out to the community through social media, and it was a confused message. And as a police officer, I know specifically for the Loveland Police Department, we're criticized from so many different points of view when the information may not be entirely accurate. So again, I'd ask my student to understand that what they're hearing and seeing is everyone is facing this. Who is the bad guy here? It's the person who enters a school with a weapon meant to do harm. It is not the teachers, it's not the administration, it's not, you know, the police. It's everyone is trying to do the best they can. And I agree with you, Diane, for your first statement when you said, this is wonderful that this happened and it was not real. It wasn't a real threat. There was no bullets flying. There was no bomb that went off. Are we not blessed to have had this situation occur to where we can have this discussion, have this training, and prepare for this mentally in the future? And I think it's so important for us to have these discussions. And this is a wonderful outcome of a very tragic day. So I would say, who is to blame here? It's fear. And I think and I'm a student of history, we have nothing to fear but fear itself was said in 1933. It was one of our presidents, Franklin Roosevelt, in his inauguration speech. It was so true then, and it's so true now.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, were there any other questions that had been asked before that we didn't summarize correctly? Yes, ma'am. We'll go here and then YouTube.
Thank you. I just had a clarification question for the chief. On the Safe to Tell tips, you had said that if they do rise to a level that warrants a warrant, you are able to do that if you need to?
That is correct. We work very closely with our district attorney's office. There are, protocols in place. There's Colorado statutes that say that these are anonymous, and they're true to that. But in the event that we feel that this warrant would, or this issue would warrant further review, we can go to the district attorney's office and write a warrant and get that information. Especially, and there is some aspects of the law that would stipulate if it was meant to bully or harass or be just wrong and it was on purpose, we can certainly go after the culprit, because this isn't funny. We want to dive into that, and our district attorney cares very deeply about our children here. I know he's sitting here in the crowd, so that's just testimony to how much he cares about your children in this community as well.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'm so glad that you're here too. I'm so glad everybody's here. Glad MJ's still here. It's wonderful. I had another question about the two tips that day. The tip for Loveland High and then the later tip for Irwin. Were they related?
I think the best way to say they were related in topic, but not we couldn't necessarily tie that was the same individual.
Okay, okay. Because I have two kids here at the high school, and I have a kid at Irwin as well. So we saw both sides of it, and I think we as parents need to take a little bit of ownership about how every single one of us has one of these things in our hands all the time, including our kids. And I think a lot of what ended up happening that day, it was a false alarm. And a lot of what ended up happening that day was because some people panicked. And then everybody could text everybody at every school, and then it all just spread like wildfire. And you know, the old adage, a lie can go around the world before the truth gets up for breakfast. And it was almost impossible to keep ahead of it with facts that day. So I think we as parents need to take a little bit of ownership and just keep everything in perspective and not lose our heads, and encourage our kids to not lose their heads as well. I know I did not get my daughter from Irwin that day. I had a lot of friends who did go get their kids from Irwin that day. And my daughter, at the end of the day, said that she was happy that I didn't pick her up because she had friends at school who were really panicking, and she was able to stay there and help them calm down. And I was really proud of her for that. So I'm really thankful that you guys are all here today. I'm also thankful for all the people who did come today. I think there's a lot fewer people here today than were commenting online. I'll say that nicely. It's a lot easier to say ugly things online, but we did the hard work of coming here and talking about it. So I want to thank everybody for coming today.
Thank you, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
First, I want to say thank you for actually having this conversation with us, because sometimes we feel like we're left out and you guys aren't listening. In talking about messaging to all of us, I know in the past there have been threats, maybe even a lockdown. Your student's not here all day. They show up to school, campus is on a lockdown. I don't really want my student here if campus is locked down. Is there a way, I know law enforcement has it where if there's something going on in your neighborhood, they can message you to shelter in place, not come outside. Could you guys maybe look into something like that so our kids know, hey, something's going down on campus. Maybe you shouldn't be here. Or sometimes we don't hear about the lockdown until after it happens. That's when you communicate to us. And it would be nice to have more up-to-the-date information so we can make decisions. Maybe we have our kid out at a doctor's appointment, we show up at the school's on lockdown, secured perimeter, something like that. We'd like to know that so we can make that call before our kids show up. And the most impacted that day were our students. And I have a senior and a freshman. They have two different stories. And I think you owe it to them to listen to what that day was like for them. Because it was very traumatic for some and not that big of a deal for others. And they would appreciate knowing that you guys are listening to them, because every day they're the ones that have to show up here. And that's all I have. Oh, I have one more thing. She kind of addressed it, but maybe we need to look at making it, you can't yell fire in a crowded auditorium, right? Maybe there needs to be some consequences so kids don't make these false safe details. And maybe it's a good thing that the DA's here so he can hear that too. Because Safe to Tell is a great program. My kids have used it for other things. But we can't keep having our kids call in these fake threats and then maybe one a day, something that might appear to be a non-credible threat is a credible threat. And then we're having a totally different conversation. Thank you.
Thanks. All right, were there any other questions that we did not, Christy?
Actually brought up a clarifying question. She wanted to know, like, it was mentioned that it wasn't like specific to Loveland High. How do you guys make the decision to know which school to try to prepare for it to be at, if it's not specified in the Safe to Tell message?
Yeah, so all of the threats or tips, I don't call them because they're not all threats. It is specific to location. It's just this specific threat was at General Loveland, so it attached to Loveland High School. But no, within Safe to Tell, there are requirements for school, location, school district, and school. So that was a little different from this threat than, other tips. So it is specific to, actual building, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, we have time for one more, and I believe Meg at the back there wanted to follow up.
If If I may, I had asked specifically about, in the aftermath of this, the nature of the decision, the basis of the decision to suspend the administrator. Was there any action taken for the teachers? I appreciate the listening, the discussing. I appreciate the updated policies and everything else that's been discussed here tonight. I'm asking specifically about this situation, this occasion. You know, if our kids ditch school, they get suspended. The phrase active shooter is very polarizing. Obviously, that's the worst of all situations. If we fill in that blank with anything else, a fire, a flood, bear in the hallway, what is the consequence of teachers making this decision? What was the consequence this time?
Consequence, we wouldn't talk about personnel disposition, but as far as progressive discipline is what we follow in the district, and there are certain steps with that, such as there's verbal coaching, there's written warnings, there's suspensions, and there's termination would be part of progressive discipline.
Okay, I want to thank everybody for your heartfelt comments and your thoughts, as well as your questions. We really do appreciate it, and I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Sheever, I think, for a few quick words.
Thank you deeply for engaging in this conversation with us tonight. We hear you, we see you. Most importantly, we hear our students and we see them as well, and I know that you're here on their behalf. We are too. As I said earlier, and I'll just repeat it, safety and security is a non-negotiable. It is truly, kids are not available to learn if they don't feel safe. And again, that's emotional safety and physical safety. And as parents, you and community members, you send your children to us, and you trust us to keep them safe. You trust us to educate them, but you also entrust us during the school day to make sure that they're emotionally and physically safe. And that is our priority. And hopefully you heard that, and hopefully you also heard that we are reflective, and it is about continuously reflecting on our practices and our protocols to get better, because there's really no margin for error when it comes to safety. We want to be perfect, and that's what we're striving for. And so, again, just really want to thank you for this engagement. This isn't a one and done. Again, our commitment is to continue engaging with our community, with our parents, with our students and our staff in this important conversation. You know that you watch the news, and every night there seems to be stories on school safety. And if it's not here in northern Colorado, it's in Metro Denver, or it's somewhere else, anywhere USA. And so it is top of mind. And we're not afraid. We're not afraid to take this on. We have to take it on, and it is our commitment. So again, just want to thank you all earnestly and sincerely for being here with us tonight, and please continue to dialogue with us. If you have questions or comments, if you want to email us, you want to call us, we are communicative. We are. Hopefully you find us to be responsive. When you ask questions, we provide answers, and if you need more information, then press us if you want more. But again, we appreciate your engagement this evening, and thank you for coming.
Thank you, everybody. On the table at the back where you first came in, we have a stack of index cards that if you have an additional comment or if you have an additional question, please feel free to fill that out and provide us with your contact information, and either someone at the school level or the district level will be happy to reach out to you. All right, thank you.